Welcome to a very slow journey into the past. Today we're going to travel gently to the Middle Ages, a time of castles, carts, and an astonishing amount of mud. You may think you'd make a fine knight or a clever merchant, but by the end of this journey you might realize you probably wouldn't last more than a single day. Don't worry, we'll explain it all in the most soft, uneventful way possible, perfect for drifting off. It's morning in the year 1325. The rooster has been awake for hours, but you've been sleeping on a sack of straw. The straw is a little lumpy, and unfortunately, shared with a few small insects who seem rather pleased you're here. You open your eyes. The room is dark. There's no glass in the window, just wooden shutters, and a faint chilly draft slipping in. Breakfast is not pancakes or coffee. It's bread. Stale bread. If you're lucky, you might dip it into something warm. You take a bite and wonder where the butter is. There is no butter. In fact, the concept of 3 meals a day hasn't been invented yet. If you're a peasant, you'll spend most of your day in the fields, bending over, pulling weeds. Or if you live in town, you might be carrying buckets of water from the well. The buckets are heavy, the water splashes, and the ground is inevitably muddy. The streets are narrow, lined with houses, and since plumbing is still a distant dream, you'll notice a certain smell. People empty chamber pots into the street, and if you're not careful, the contents might land on your shoes, which, by the way, are not waterproof. By sunset, you're tired, hungry, and slightly damp. You eat more bread, maybe a piece of cheese, if the mice haven't found it first. Then you lie down again on that same straw mattress with the same little insects, and tomorrow you'll do it all again, unless, of course, the plague gets you. And so, dear listener, this is why you wouldn't last a single day in the Middle Ages. But don't worry, you are safe now, in your warm bed. Let your mind wander far away from the mud, the smells, and the bread, and drift slowly into sleep. So what was life like in the Middle Ages? In this sleepy village, the sun has risen once more, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. A rooster somewhere in the distance has already been awake for hours, crowing incessantly to announce the start of a brand new day. But you sleep soundly in your humble abode, nestled between the tall grasses, straw piled high on a simple wooden frame. It's a comfortable bed, or at least it would be if it weren't for the lumps. Oh, and the small insects that have decided to make their home on your person. Yes, they too enjoy the warmth of the rising sun and the sweet dreams you emit while you slumber. What will today bring? Well, whatever it holds, it will likely be much the same as yesterday. And most certainly, life in the Middle Ages won't let up on even one single day. Though you're safely tucked away in your bed right now, that is about to change. Are you ready to find out how? Because we're about to show you what a typical day in the Middle Ages was really like. It's only when you wake up that you realize it's another ordinary day in the Middle Ages. First of all, you notice that your eyelids feel heavy, sticky, and uncomfortable. You try to sit up, but quickly decide against it. There's some movement in the pile of straw beside you. You look closer and see 2 small insects scurrying away. They must have thought you were part of the bedding. Now that you're awake, the sounds of the morning reach your ears. Birds tweet merrily from their perches. Dogs bark in the distance. A rooster crows, reminding you that yes, it is indeed morning. So you throw back the covers, swing your legs over the side of the bed, and climb out onto the cold, hard floor. Breakfast isn't for a few hours yet, but you're hungry. So you head into the kitchen and help yourself to some stale bread. That's right. This isn't the land of plenty. In fact, there's not a lot of food around. The entire family likely dined on nothing but bread for days. Perhaps today it will be a little softer than usual. You bite into it and discover that no, it's rock hard. But hunger eventually compels you to eat it anyway. Once the bread is gone, you go back to your room and splash some water on your face. At least someone in the house has a basin and some water, so you count yourself fortunate. But you still can't shake off the feeling that today will be long and boring. Soon enough, the rest of the family stirs, and it's time to eat breakfast. There's no coffee or tea, no pancakes or eggs, just bread and stale porridge. As you eat, you think about the coming day ahead. Will it be exciting? Will anything out of the ordinary happen? Well, you wish. But life in the Middle Ages was anything but exciting. For most people, each day passed like the one before and the one that will come after. And the best thing you could hope for is that nothing changes. The blacksmith doesn't lose his hammer. No livestock die, and the local lord doesn't feel like collecting taxes. Finally, the evening approaches and you can go back home. Once you step inside, you notice the inviting sight of your straw mattress. Unfortunately, the straw has absorbed the humidity of the day and is uncomfortably damp. But you have no choice but to lie down on it again. And besides, there's no other furniture in the house anyway. It's not as though you can sit anywhere else. As you attempt to make yourself comfortable, you hear a knock at the door. You tell whoever it is to come in, and a young child enters. "Mother wants to know if you've seen my doll anywhere," the child says before running off. You ponder whether you should tell the mother that the children have been playing with the doll in the mud all afternoon. After all, it's just a worn-out rag doll, but then decide that it's none of your business. When dinner time rolls around, you have another slice of bread, though it's warmed up this time. And if you're feeling fancy, you can dip it into a thin broth. But tonight, even that luxury is denied to you. You stare at the piece of bread, wondering where the butter is, but then you remember there is no butter. This isn't a place where meals are plentiful, and you shouldn't count on getting 3 meals a day. Most people ate whenever they could. There were no set meal times back then, and you never knew when you'd find your next snack. With dinner over, you head back to your room. But first, you have to cross the yard. The rain from earlier has made the ground sticky, and you feel the thick mud sucking at your worn leather shoes. Not wanting to track mud into the house, you stop and pull off your shoes. You wring out the tops, then put them back on and hurry inside. Each day was full of mud, rain, and the smell of decaying waste. Medieval sanitation was non-existent, and toilets were unheard of. Waste was usually thrown out the window, so you had to watch your step. Of course, this meant that the streets were always dirty, and it wasn't uncommon to slip and fall into a pile of filth. As you crawl into bed, you think that maybe tomorrow will be better. Surely the sun will shine and the sky will be blue. But then you remember that life in the Middle Ages was rarely exciting. You try to sleep, but it's difficult. The pile of straw beneath you isn't the most comfortable, and the fleas that have made their home here don't help. You toss and turn, hoping to catch some sleep before it's time to rise again and do it all over again. Life in the Middle Ages wasn't easy, but it's also not as terrible as Hollywood makes it out to be. Sure, there was poverty, hunger, and death. Peasants endured long hours of labor and merciless masters. However, if you ask us, the worst part of medieval life was definitely the mead. When you're stuck ankle-deep in mud and trying to deliver important cargo, every step you take could be your last. You can't afford to slip and fall into a pile of filth. The mead not only made life dirty and uncomfortable, but it also created dangerous conditions. Now it's your turn. Tell us in the comments how you would survive a day in the Middle Ages. Remember to subscribe if you want to learn more about history. Tonight, we drift gently back to ancient Rome. You may imagine grand marble buildings, heroic gladiators, and feasts of grapes and wine, but the reality was a little less glamorous. And by the end of this story, you'll see why you, dear listener, wouldn't last a single day there. It's morning in the year 75 AD. The sun rises over the rooftops of the city. But you're already awake. Why? Because the streets outside are noisy. Very noisy. Carts rumble over the stone roads. Metal wheels echoing between the walls of tall, crowded buildings. Voices call out in Latin, merchants setting up their stalls. children running through the alleyways. You get up from your bed, which is not exactly soft, more like a thin mattress stuffed with reeds. There is no running water in your apartment. If you need water, you must walk down the street to the public fountain, carrying a jug that feels heavier with every step. Breakfast is not eggs or toast, it's bread, again, perhaps dipped in olive oil, if you have some left. The air smells faintly of smoke from nearby bakeries, but also less pleasant things. The city is crowded, and there is no modern plumbing. Waste water flows down the gutters in the street, past your feet, heading somewhere you'd rather not think about. By midday, the heat of the Roman sun presses down. You seek shade under an awning, but the marketplace is loud, chaotic, and full of people haggling for food. If you have work to do, perhaps as a laborer or a shop assistant, the hours are long, and the pay is small. In the afternoon, you might visit the public baths. They are a place to wash, to relax, but also to gossip. The water is warm, but you try not to think about how many people have been in it before you. By evening, you are tired. Dinner is simple. Bread again. Maybe some lentils. Maybe a small piece of fish. You return to your apartment. The streets are quieter now, but still not silent. Somewhere you hear music. Somewhere else, laughter. You lie down. The reed mattress creaks under your weight, and you try to rest. But tomorrow, the noise, the heat, and the smells will greet you again. And if you're unlucky, you might catch one of the many illnesses that pass easily through such a crowded city. And so, dear listener, this is why you wouldn't last a single day in ancient Rome. But tonight, you are safe, in your own bed. Let the sounds of the past fade away and drift slowly into sleep. Your alarm rings at 6 a.m., but you don't need an alarm to wake up in ancient Rome. Why? Because the streets outside are noisy. Carts rumble over the stone roads, their metal wheels echoing between the walls of the tall, crowded buildings. Voices call out in Latin. Merchants set up their stalls. Children run through the alleyways. It's hard to stay asleep in this racket. You get up from your bed and stretch. No time for reading the news or checking your notifications. It's time to start your day in ancient Rome. That doesn't mean you have a comfortable bed to wake up on. In fact, your mattress is more of a thin layer of reed stuffed inside a cheap fabric cover. There's no room for a box spring or a fancy comforter in a space where all the furniture has to be multi-purpose. Your bed might double as a table, and your chairs might be used for storage. Once you get yourself dressed, you notice that your tunic, the main article of clothing in ancient Rome, has a few too many stains on it that you can't quite explain. Maybe it's best to wear something new today. Luckily, you have a spare tunic in your wardrobe. Not that you'd have much choice even if you wanted to wear something different. After all, everyone wore tunics in ancient Rome. For men and women, young and old, rich and poor, a tunic was the basic garment of everyday life. This simple knee-length robe came in various styles, but they were all basically a rectangle of cloth with a hole cut out for your head. After tying your sandals onto your feet, you need to find some water. There isn't any running water in your apartment, so you'll have to make a trip to the public fountain, which means you'll have to carry your jug back with you. It's getting heavier with every step. You think about how nice it would be to have bottled water delivered to your home, but you're living in ancient Rome. Forget about modern conveniences. Finally, you reach your kitchen. It's time to prepare breakfast. But what's there to prepare? It's the same thing every day, bread. Maybe you have some stale bread lying around from yesterday's dinner, and maybe, just maybe, you have some olive oil left over to dip your bread in. But most days it's just dry bread, and you eat it without complaint. People in ancient Rome ate 2 meals a day, at roughly midday and late afternoon, and the staple of those meals was bread. In between, they might have a light snack, but that was about it. Meat wasn't eaten very often by ordinary people because it was expensive, and fish was only available to those near the coast. As you walk out of your house, you avoid stepping in any waste. It's not easy to miss because the city of Rome had no modern plumbing, and so the waste of nearly 1 million people filled the gutters in the streets. To make matters worse, there were stray dogs everywhere, sniffing around in the filth for something to eat. Many people didn't even bother to leash their dogs, and so they roamed freely through the streets, barking at pedestrians and fighting each other. You could hear the cacophony of shouting dogs almost as easily as you could hear the shouts of human vendors. You find yourself passing by a bakery. Ah, the smell of fresh bread warms your stomach. You wish you had some money to buy a loaf, but unfortunately you've spent all your cash on, well, more bread. As you keep walking, you realize that your stomach is rumbling. It's nearly lunchtime, and all you've had today is a couple pieces of stale bread. You're starting to feel hungry. Luckily, you're close to the marketplace, and you know they have plenty of food there. But when you arrive, you see that it's livelier than you expected. People are pushing past you to try and grab the freshest fruit or the biggest cut of meat. You watch families squabble over the price of grain or the quality of a fish. You spot a merchant selling dates and figs, and you make your way toward him. You need some fruit. Now, the problem with the marketplaces in Rome was that they were crowded. Not just crowded, but crushingly, suffocatingly crowded. Vendors called out to customers over the din, trying to draw attention to their wares. Bartering was common, and so were arguments over who was trying to rip whom off. Every day, people arrived at the markets from the countryside with baskets of goods to sell. Vendors sometimes traveled to Rome from as far away as Greece or Africa, bringing exotic foods to the capital. The variety of goods in the marketplace was staggering. Grain, fruit, nuts, olives, cheese, leather goods, pottery, tools, and weapons were just a fraction of what you could buy at the marketplace. Maybe you stop to admire a beautiful piece of pottery, but before you know it, you're surrounded by fellow shoppers, and you can barely move. With a deep breath, you push your way out of the crowd and decide to go to the shops instead. You need some supplies, and you know just the place. It's a small family-owned business where the owner knows you by name and always saves aside a little bit of oil for you. But when you get there, you find that the store is closed. You turn around to go home, but then you notice something strange. The faces of all the statues in the street seem to be melting. You blink and the statues are still melting. Then you remember that you're in ancient Rome, and the Colosseum isn't a movie set. Those aren't actors wearing costumes. These are real statues, frozen forever in their expressions. You shouldn't have looked away. Now you'll never sleep again. You finally arrive home, exhausted from the day's events. You look forward to taking a bath, but there's no bathtub waiting for you. Bathing at home was a rare luxury in ancient Rome. Instead, you take a break from your busy day to visit the public baths. Most people bathed in the public baths once or twice a week, and it was more than just a chance to get clean. It was a social event. Men and women of all ages met at the baths to wash themselves, scrape off dead skin, and relax on heated stones. The steam filled the air with scents of lavender and herbs, and patrons chatted about the latest news. The only downside to bathing in public was that the water, while cleaned regularly, wasn't exactly sanitary. So you took your chances and enjoyed the warmth. You're exhausted from your trip to the baths. You change into some fresh clothes and leave the house again to meet some friends, but you don't get far. Someone grabs your shoulder and asks for money. You turn around to see a beggar holding out his hand, and you drop some coins into it. People in ancient Rome were generally generous to beggars, knowing that they might become one themselves. One day, a person could be wealthy and respected. But a bad investment or a sick child could bring them down to the beggar's level in an instant. You finally make it to your friend's house and spend the evening drinking wine and eating dinner. Well, more accurately, you eat bread again. Maybe you add some lentils to the mix, or, if you're feeling fancy, a small piece of fish. You don't complain. Life is good. When you say goodbye to your friend and head home, you can hear music drifting from an open doorway. Laughter spills out from another building. You miss being part of the party, but you're exhausted. When you open your front door, you collapse onto your reed mattress. You sigh. tomorrow, you'll have to do it all again. You eventually fall asleep, but you dream of the trash in the streets and the begging children. It's not a good night's sleep. In the morning, you'll probably get up sick. After all, it's hard to stay healthy when you're surrounded by so many people all the time. Well, now it's time for bed. Let the sounds of the ancient Romans fade away and drift into a peaceful slumber. Wait, did you hear that scratching sound? What was that? Never mind. Just go back to sleep. Rome was one of the greatest cities in the ancient world, but how long could you survive there? See, if you lasted this long, you probably wouldn't survive much longer because you've picked up a fever and you'll die soon. Or maybe you got food poisoning from that bad fish you ate and now you're running for the bathroom. Don't worry though, because today we've got good news for you. You don't have to worry about surviving in ancient Rome because you can learn about it from the comfort of your own home. Now, if you want to learn more about the Colosseum, click here. And if you want to learn more about the Roman Empire, click here. And if you want to learn more about the Roman army, click here.